Okay, so my watch is telling me it's 6:30, so we're just gonna rev up and go. So, good evening, everybody. Hello, and welcome to Education, Beer, and Dressing from the Waist Up, COVID Industry Insights, hosted by the Toronto Alumni Chapter of the University of Waterloo. First off, I just want to wish everyone well. I hope you're staying safe and staying healthy. No one really needs to be told this, but 2020 has been a pretty rough year, and especially now that the city of Toronto is back under lockdown, everyone on the chapter and from the panel just wants to make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. So with that said, tonight I'm really excited to be bringing real-life COVID-era business insights to you from our wonderful panel of 4 entrepreneurs and business experts. So first things first, my name is Don Tu. I will be your host and moderator tonight. I am but one of the wonderful 6 members of the UW Alumni Chapter that has been serving the GTA. As a chapter, we aim to bring alumni in the GTA together through different events and activities, continue to build our networks, and assemble the Waterloo community in the region. So first, as we start tonight's event, I want to acknowledge that the land I'm broadcasting from today is on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. We recognize that this is a small but important step for us to open pathways of dialogue and respect, and to learn the history of the land on which we live and work. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about what steps the University of Waterloo is taking towards the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, please visit the links provided in the chat. With that said, I'd also like to extend a warm thank you to Manulife Financial, who is tonight's affinity sponsor. They have been a big supporter of tonight's event, and we couldn't have done this without them. It's with their support that we're able to give away 2 gift cards tonight by random draw. One draw for submitting a question in advance through the registration form, and the other to one lucky attendee this evening. So stay tuned until the end of the discussion to find out if that is in fact you. So without any further ado, let's introduce you to tonight's panelists. So first we have Trishala Pillai with Bachelor's of Arts 2016. She is Director of Strategy at the Rumie Initiative, an award-winning education technology nonprofit. So the Rumie Initiative has built an online micro-learning library centered on career and life skills for anyone, anywhere, to learn things in minutes. And Trishala herself has over 5+ years of experience contributing to high-growth Canadian companies like Shopify in their early days. And she's also a moderator of high-stakes public discourse on the new kind of business that combines profit and purpose. We have Callum Hay, Bachelor of Software Engineering, 2008. Callum is a co-founder and the head brewer at Halo Brewery, a small craft brewery located in Toronto's West End. Callum left his old job as a former freelance software programmer to start Halo in 2016, where he now applies the engineering mindset to brewing. Meela Banerjee is a business advisor at Velocity, UW's entrepreneurship program, as well as the founder of Personify AI. She has worked in corporate positions spanning consulting, pharmaceutical sales, training, and much more. With Personify AI, she is developing a personal wardrobe assistant that can take care of your clothing needs seamlessly, integrating the digital with the real world. Meela holds a Bachelor of Science from the University of Alberta and an MBA from the Rotman School of Management at the University of Toronto. And fourth, we have Manoj Gandhi, Product and Business Development Director at Manulife Financial. Manoj is a fellow alumni who graduated in 2008 with a Bachelor of Mathematics in Actuarial Science. With over 10 years of experience within the life insurance industry, he has worked across several areas of expertise, including group financial risk, affinity markets pricing, and individual health and dental products teams. So Trishala, Callum, Meela, Manoj, welcome to all of you. And again, welcome to everyone who's joining us on the webcast tonight. Here's a quick overview of what how the event is going to play out. We're about to jump in with our panelists with a quick introduction of the work that they're currently doing. Then I will ask each panelist a more directed question in order to draw out some details of what their experience has been so far in 2020. Following that, we'll have 2 open questions for the panelists to discuss together. And then after that, we'll have closing remarks. So I'm sure that you've had enough of me and you want to hear about the panelists. So with the stage set, let's start with Trishala. Trishala, could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do?
Absolutely. Nice to meet everyone virtually. So as Don was saying, I work with an organization called Rumie. Rumie is an open library of life and career skills called Bytes, which can be accessed on your browser or on your phone, among other channels, but I thought those were the ones that would be most relevant for this group. And essentially, it's a bunch of skills that are known as 21st century skills. There's a lot of public discourse on why these skills are important, why we need to develop the innately human skills that machines can't replicate or compete with. And that's essentially the gap that we're trying to bridge. Beyond that, there's just a lot of simple things we don't know. We're not formally trained on them. We might be nervous to ask people about it. Things like how to set boundaries with social media, how to grocery shop for one, when to reply all to emails, or one that I read recently, how to interact appropriately with people with disabilities. So these are, things that Bytes can help you with in your learning journey. If you go on Rumie today, you'll find over 350 Bytes. And the fun thing is that they've all been built actually during this pandemic in the last 6 months. You can learn anything in under 9 minutes, and it's truly built for modern learners like yourself on this call, keeping their unique needs and frankly high expectations in mind. Our mission is really to help people scroll with purpose and to learn a little about a lot. So really go wide with their learning, discover new topics and interests, and then go on to Udacity or Coursera to go deeper into the subject. And we want to make learning as easy and fun as social media. So really encouraging people to, review 3 Bytes before bed instead of going through this rabbit hole on your Instagram feed. I specifically work on corporate strategies, so bespoke partnerships that sit outside our standard model of engagement. I focus a lot of my time on our financial sustainability, trying to build and develop our business model, which is already well researched and celebrated. In fact, it's the subject of a full Harvard Business School study. But for the times that we're in right now, it really is important to think critically about how we can evolve. And so, that's my role in a nutshell. I work across many different functions, but with the mission of really making learning better for everyone.
Thank you so much, Trishala. Callum, how about you next?
Hi, everyone. So I left my career in programming to become a brewer. I'm the owner, founder, and head brewer and technician of Halo Brewery. We're a small microbrewery in the west end of Toronto. We opened to the public in April of 2016, so we're about 4.5 years old. My work with Halo is quite vast and varied. I wear a lot of hats. Though I could broadly describe myself as sort of the technical lead of all things within Halo. From a product perspective, I do recipe development, ingredients and inventory management, brewing, cellaring, packaging. From an equipment and technical perspective, I maintain the brewery. I fix and rebuild equipment. I find people that can if I can't. I also develop the software. Being a software engineer, I built the website, the online store. I've also built some custom inventory management software instead of paying other people to do it. From a management perspective, I do a good portion of the team management, training of brewery employees, hiring, any significant high-level decisions that the company go through me. And then administrative-wise, paperwork, government, accountants, lawyers, so on and so forth. And then finally, marketing. I work with our design studio, Underline. They're right above us, actually, which is convenient. They do awesome stuff, build our assets, our labels, anything visual. And then also working with my wife, Sarah, who does all of our social media work and day-to-day design. So lots of hats.
Great. Thank you very much, Callum. Mila, how about you?
Good evening, everyone. So like Callum, I wear a lot of hats, except for I like to call them cookie jars. My hands are in lots of cookie jars. So I've cultivated my career very broadly. I used to code in the 90s. I know I just dated myself. It happens. I spent 12 years in the pharmaceutical and healthcare industry. And after my MBA, I became an entrepreneur. I just caught the bug. And in the last 9 years, I started businesses in 5 countries. And so now my 2 major focuses are my tech startup, Personify AI, which is a lot of machine learning, front end and back end from the tech side of things. For those of you in the audience who are interested in the technology, I think AI is just the most amazing thing going forward. And so I wanted to be on the inside of it, not on the outside. So that's one of the reasons why I started Personify AI. So we're in closed invite only, but if anybody on this panel would like to join our beta and loves betas, then you're welcome to join or go onto our website and put in the code Waterloo, and we'll post that at some point in the chat for you guys if makes you excited. So, and then my business advisor position at Velocity is a ton of fun. It's my way of giving back. I've got a number of startup companies that are anywhere from discovery and validation through to scaling up. And through to is basically product market fit. And so we do a lot of coaching on an individual basis to help companies get to the next stage and reach their objectives. That's me.
Great. Thank you so much, Mila. And Manoj, over to you.
Thank you. And thanks again for hosting this tonight. So my name is Manoj Gandhi, and I'm at Manulife Financial. And as mentioned, I'm an actuary by trade. I've rotated my way through various departments at Manulife, but currently I'm actually now focused on product development and pricing side of individual insurance products. So these products can include the traditional life, living benefits, health and dental, or travel products. What's specifically unique about our division is that we sell our products through various different distribution channels. So that could be the traditional advisor channel of meeting someone face to face and fixing the right product for you, or direct to consumer. So that could be buying insurance directly online through our website, which is coverme.com, or through the sponsor association channel. So that includes groups like this one, the Alumni Association, Costco, CAA, or any other professional group. You've probably also seen our Cover Me commercials on TV as well. Hopefully you have. The ultimate goal is, regardless of all these distribution channels, is to find the right product and the right fit, regardless of how the product is sold or where it's sold. So yeah, that's slowly what I did.
Thank you, Manoj, and again, thanks to everybody for just kicking us off there. So now we'll jump into some more direct questions that will give you or give everybody an opportunity to learn a little bit more about how your businesses have changed over the course of the pandemic. So let's go backwards now. Starting with you, Manoj. How have people's insurance needs changed since the pandemic began, and how have you gone about maintaining relationships with clients over the pandemic?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think depending on the actual type of insurance, some needs have changed, some have actually not. If we look at kind of health and dental insurance, people stopped going to a lot of the medical practitioners during the pandemic. They stopped going to see their chiropractor or a massage therapist on kind of like a weekly or monthly basis. Some people have even stopped going for routine dental cleanings, after every recommended period of time. But on the flip side, there have been more major dental procedures because of that. So I would say the need for health and dental insurance hasn't changed. In the sense it's always going to be needed, but what is being utilized has actually changed. Another big one for us was, I guess, over the pandemic was travel insurance. Obviously, it was very prevalent during the whole pandemic. But nowadays, people are traveling a lot less. So there isn't as much travel insurance, but the need for travel insurance has gone up. So when people do travel nowadays, there's a large proportion or the percentage of people that are actually getting insured is much higher. People are worried about COVID-19 when they travel. People are worried about trip cancellation if something were to happen now and they're not able to proceed with their trip. So something like that has become more important. Our living benefit products have become a lot more prevalent during the pandemic. So things like critical illness and disability have come to the forefront as well. In terms of your other question about maintaining relationships, maintaining and developing relationships in our industry has definitely evolved. The insurance industry is probably one of the industries where it's very archaic in the sense that we rely quite heavily on the face-to-face interaction between advisors and clients. So during the pandemic, obviously, we had seen this major shift in terms of advisors making that progression to meet with their clients or making new connections, relying more on technology to communicate with customers. So yeah, that's kind of, hopefully that answered that question.
No, I think it does, Manoj. And if I can just pry a little bit more, when you're talking, I won't tell anyone that you use the word archaic, but do you I guess usually you said you're meeting people face to face, and so now during the sort of summer where there was a bit of a lull, were people kind of pushing you to go back in that direction? Or were you, really pushing people, not pushing people, but really saying, hey, could we do this over Zoom? Can we do this electronically? What can you talk a little bit more about, sort of the nitty gritty?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to say and I'm talking more from a sales perspective. So we had two reactions from I guess our advisors. One was the fact of there's a group of advisors that say, hey, this is not going to last long. We're going to wait for this thing to blow over, and then we're going to sort of get back into our normal, or what normal was. There was the other group of advisors that said, hey, we quickly need to adapt to this new norm. We need to get on Zoom and we need to, be able to make these connections. The second group, or the latter group I spoke about, those are sort of the ones that have succeeded through the pandemic. We're now seeing an overall transitional industry shift of, more of the Zoom meetings. So, I think the industry is changing and has been changing. So it will continue to do, especially from a sales perspective. And as well as I talked about the direct consumer, that's also becoming more prevalent in our industry as well. More people are getting more comfortable to go online, do their own research, and make purchases on their own with insurance, and getting that advice online now as well. So
that's very interesting. Thanks, Manoj. Thanks for sharing. I'm gonna switch over to another panelist now. So Mila, on to you. So you're not only building your own fashion/AI startup, and I'm sorry if that sounds a little bit rigid because my background is certainly not in the coding space, but that's besides the point. You're in a mentorship position at Velocity with other entrepreneurs. You're advising other founders. So what was your work usually like in the times previous, before the pandemic, and how has your advice to founders changed in light of the current pandemic situation, as well as what you think might be coming up?
So great questions. So I actually started with Velocity virtually. So I have been an entirely virtual advisor, which has been a really interesting experience. And so I'm basically spending my days on meetings like this where we're talking one-on-one and discussing their issues. In terms of the pandemic, it's been really fascinating. So we're lucky in that our group of founders are adaptive, they're nimble. This is all part of being a startup. And so they understood the need to be adaptive and nimble as the pandemic started to come in waves. And I would say that at the very beginning, a lot of it was up sort of rooted because of the way in which the VCs looked at their portfolios and the way in which they were responding to what was happening in the financial markets. So the VCs really took stock. They stopped investing in new businesses, took stock of their initial or existing portfolio companies, and really decided, what were they going to do? Where were they going to spend their extra attention to help their companies get through this, and where were they going to reinvest money? So they were not really doing anything new. So our advice to the entrepreneurs was to stay lean and to ride it out, to be able to extend their runways. But this started to shift as well. And so even though it's not even been a year, believe it or not, I know it feels a lot longer, a lot has changed. And so the VCs actually started getting back into investing again. And then they were looking for, companies that had a good story post-COVID because they needed to balance their portfolios. So what we counseled everyone on was really sort of being able to show that this was not just a business that was okay in a pandemic, but after the pandemic, and to really sort of explain why this was a good investment going forward. And then actually now I would even say that the VCs are back into thinking a little bit more opportunistically. They understand that there are structural changes coming down the pipe. And so we're really talking to our companies about thinking, what does the future hold and how will we continue to thrive in that new future? I don't know if that was a really long-winded response, but we've just been changing and morphing and adapting and taking in new information. That's been our world.
I wouldn't say that it was long-winded. I think it was very descriptive, and I thank you for that. If anything, it needs to be longer-winded because I'm going to follow up with that and just ask you, you're saying that there was sort of a change in how, venture capitalists, the VCs are looking at startups. I guess the first part of the question is, do you think that was more a change in how they wanted information packaged, or just like a fundamental shift in like what kind of businesses they were interested in investing in?
Yeah, I would say that, so at the beginning, they weren't investing in anything new. They were just taking stock and making sure that their existing portfolio was set to survive. And then I would say that they were looking to balance their portfolio. They were looking to say, okay, well, given that we have these types of investments in these types of companies and not, maybe 10% of them look like they're great for the future, how do we get more companies that are going to be great for the future? And then now I think we've started to open up our minds around what is the future, and I think we're a little closer to the end of the tunnel, so we can see a bit more. And so I think people are starting to understand a little bit more about what things will keep the same as what we've experienced in the pandemic and what things will change. Because it's been tough, but there's been a few learnings and key things that we've figured out in the pandemic that I think will hold true. And I think that's one of your questions, Don, so I'll stop talking.
Don't spoil anything. Don't spoil anything for our attendees. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you very much, Mila. Callum, let's pivot over to you. So early on in the pandemic, at least, in terms of what I was listening to in the news I was ingesting, I heard a lot about how, food producers were needing to adjust how and where they ship their products because of a change in how everyone is just consuming, food and drink. So a lot about changing from pallets of potatoes to bags of potatoes that people can take home. And we know now that because of the new lockdowns, restaurants and bars are either closed or open only for takeout. As a brewery, how have your sales channels shifted, and what kind of work have you needed to do in order to accommodate that?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. So, a brief overview. Halo has 3 sales channels. We have our tap room and patio on site. We have our bottle shop, which is on site and online. And then we have licensees, which are bars, restaurants, pubs, and those are basically purchase and resellers. So before COVID, the historical mix was sort of 50%-ish licensees, 30% bottle shop, and then 10-15% tap room. And then after COVID, we basically had our entire licensee and tap room and the portion of our tap room channel totally shut off overnight. So that's about 60-70% of our volume sales were gone within the scope of a couple weeks. We were fortunate enough that our bottle shop picked up quite a bit of the loss of the other 2 channels. So basically the numbers there are our packaged product increased by about 300% virtually overnight. And then our online store sales increased by 7,200%. And then our bottle shop sales increased 250%. So thank goodness for that. But a lot of work had to go into accommodating that massive sudden change. So basically the first thing was packaging. As I mentioned, there's this sudden 300% increase. Usually, we would bottle all of our beer, and that's a very manual process. Usually I'm the one doing it too. So, we would sometimes bring in third-party canners to deal with like a sudden excess of volume, usually in the summertime, because that's when people tend to drink more beer. So in order to not be too much of a burden on myself and the employees, we got third-party canners to come in and start dealing with all of this increased packaging need. And we have a great relationship with our canner, and this has worked out pretty well. In terms of delivery and online sales, basically we had to deal with Canada Post, which basically all of our shipping needs online, needs a 19 plus signature. So, and Canada Post stopped stopped bringing mail to people who had 19 plus signatures and just bringing it to the depot. So you couldn't actually get that mail at your door anymore. So we got a lot of angry customers having to go to the depot to collect their beer for online sales. So we ended up having to switch over and find better fulfillment services in order to not anger our customers, basically. And also just recently we joined Ubereats, which has been a huge success as well. And we've only been on there for maybe 2 weeks, and it's helped a lot, which is great. In terms of our tap room and patio, we had to shut down our entire indoor space and patio instantaneously. And we sort of like were waiting, just like, you know, cautiously waiting or hopeful that eventually we could at least open up the patio, which we were able to do in the summertime. And that helped a bit with sales. But our capacity was severely limited. You know, usually it's 15 people and it was down to 8. And then there's the carefulness of dealing with having a seating area for people during COVID. So people had to text in their orders to the tap room, and that's also how we would collect their name and phone number, which is part of the protocol. In terms of our team, we basically lost half our employees almost instantly as well. People didn't want to work, and that's fine. We're happy to accommodate them and their needs. But a lot of our team members, their task scope increased, and they picked up that slack, and it helped us a lot. For example, Dan, our taproom manager and sales guy, he basically handles now all of our in-town deliveries, and he actually goes to people's doors and drops off the beer, and that's been great. So yeah, lots of changes.
For sure, a lot of changes, and 7,000% is a percentage that you don't often see unless it's a mathematical error. So, thanks for sharing that, Callum.
Yeah.
Trishala, you're up next. I've heard from a lot of my friends that nonprofits have been hit particularly hard by the pandemic. Can you speak a little bit to how nonprofits have been impacted maybe differently than a for-profit organization would be, and specifically to how the Rumie initiative structure has helped it to continue to provide services through the pandemic?
For sure. So I will start all of this with kind of a heavy, hard-hitting fact, and that is that the largest recent wave of inequity actually started with the 2008 recession. And as per what we're reading from the World Economic Forum and IMF, it is said that the COVID-19 recession could be far worse than the 2008 recession. So if you it puts it into context, the large inequities ahead of us and the amount of work that needs to be done. And this could last like a really long time. And so in the meantime, you have so many people with huge needs. And there's this gigantic need for community giving and for corporations to support those in the communities that they operate in. And as far as nonprofits is concerned, the Washington Post had shared that 1/3 of nonprofits may not survive the pandemic, which is a huge reality. And I've taken some notes over the past couple of months and what I've seen in this space that I wanted to share as insights with people, because there's a lot of learnings that we've had at Rumie over the past 6 to 7 months. So why have nonprofits been hard hit? One of the reasons is that nonprofits have traditionally relied on a just-in-time cash revenue model, which has taken a huge hit, and it's been very reliant on charitable donations, which has significantly decreased through this pandemic because of people facing their own financial issues and budget cuts. It's also been really reliant on event sponsorships, which, as we all know, is no longer, a viable option, with galas and tournaments and conferences now not fully being able to move online effectively. Another factor has been that many donors are actually diverting charitable contributions to COVID-19 responses and funds, which is great because that means that work is being done, but it means that they're writing fewer big checks. And so very few nonprofits are coming out of this with significant support. So in the meantime, while we're sorting all of this out, as I said, the needs are outpacing what nonprofits can do. And I think people and corporations need to understand that, because there's a huge need for us to act with speed and urgency. And education as a sector, which is where we work, has been even harder hit because there are now huge learning gaps and inequities. And unfortunately, online learning is not just about moving textbooks online. So for many, school and learning is something that's just sort of happening, and we're just, going through the pulses of life. But is it working for them? Is it keeping them engaged? Maybe not. So what will the impact of that be in a couple of months or years to come? As far as Rumie is concerned, I think for us, our funding model, the philosophy behind it has always been around building a business model that provides value to more than one stakeholder. If the primary beneficiary that you're supporting doesn't have the means to pay for what you're offering, it's incredibly important to build a model rooted in shared value that another stakeholder can pay for and actually gain something out of it as well, and do this in an authentic way. And that's really the philosophy of our business model. We engage with a lot of corporates, but it's not just, a hackathon or a community event that might not ever have an impact on our, actual operations and financial sustainability. But what corporations do for us actually sit at the heart of our social impact model. Hundreds of employees at Fortune 500s have actually come together through this pandemic virtually to build bites on our platform on topics that they're experts in. Employees from actually Manulife, Amazon, Loyalty One, all these great companies are creating bites for us that actually have insane amounts of impact and engagement with our learners. And we charge corporates for that because employee engagement and morale is at an all-time low, and it's actually impacting their bottom line. So that's the kind of, thing you need to start thinking about, is how can you actually do more for more stakeholders? And then frankly, also be online. I think nonprofits have typically struggled with digital. It's taken a long time for them to adopt it. And when the pandemic hit, they had to make decisions really quickly. And many of them just didn't have the skill sets internally or the guidance externally to evolve online in an easy way. So I think that's another contributing factor, and something that Rumie was able to weather well because we are digital first. And I think for me, the most interesting, Mila was talking about being an advisor at Velocity virtually. I actually started at Rumie completely virtual. I started on March 23rd. So the first week everyone went remote. And to see that we've built a library from 0 to 350 bytes, and are working with everything we've done has been virtual, is I think the silver lining in this whole pandemic for me. And I think there is a path forward, but the reality is that it's a challenging path, for nonprofits at least.
I feel as though we could do an entire event on just that, but unfortunately that is not tonight's. But I appreciate that, Trishala. Thank you very much. I think that's actually a very good jumping off point for us, because now we can have one of the open questions for the next 10 minutes or so. And the general question for the panel to take on is this: what have you found to be the most critical part of transitioning a business for success during the pandemic? And Mila, how about we start with you?
For sure. So for me, the clear winner is people. So people have been my focus for the pandemic. There's been a lot of stress, a lot of change, which has been thrusted upon them. So the theory behind change is that if you make it yourself, it's much easier to deal with than if it's thrown onto you. And so, of course, the pandemic was thrown on to all of us. There's been loneliness. So I've really been focused both on the velocity front and on my own team in terms of making sure I reach out. So our personified team has changed things up a little bit. We are interacting every day through our stand-ups and through virtual meetings. We also really encourage jumping on calls together, tandem coding, things like that, just to keep an atmosphere. We've also said, try and stay away from private channels in chat. That way, more people can get involved. We do games nights, things like this, just anything to foster more human connection. Because at the end of the day, I can't get anything done. I don't have a business if I don't have my people and if they're not happy and productive. And so, to me, that's been the most important part, and it's changed simply because the focus has been a bit more intense.
Okay, that's interesting. And I know that, if I may, as the moderator, interject a little bit, I know that I work at a relatively large firm, and in terms of keeping people happy is very interesting at this stage of the pandemic, because there's a somewhat of a gap between people who are more than happy to work from home indefinitely and other people who just really want to get back to a point where they can reach out and grab someone for a chat. So yeah, keeping the team and your people happy must be very challenging.
Yeah, and I don't want to be flippant by just saying, keep people happy. I think there's a little bit of where can we garner satisfaction? And in light of the fact that we can't choose to be at the office or interacting, what are the things that we can do to still, feel good about what we're producing, what we're doing? And I think that it's a matter of taking a moment and reflecting on what things we can focus on that are good.
For sure. I guess I would invite Callum. I'm not sure if you want to add on this point, or if you have another answer to the question of, the critical part.
Yeah, I could add on to that point a bit. Like I said, we lost half our team pretty quickly, but the people who are left, they've shown interest in other parts of the business, and I want to help them get into that. Megan, one of our front of house team members, she does lots of tastings, beer tastings and things like that, but she's always had an interest in brewing and the process around brewing and things like that. So, I got her into the back of house and showed her the brewery and showed her the process. And now she's doing cellaring and doing parts of those processes. And this makes people happy, and it makes sense. It keeps people busy. It detracts from the horrible other situation on the outside. I think it's an important point to keep your team members as happy as possible and engaged, for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Trishala, I would invite you, just, trying to sequence everybody's voices so we're not talking over each other. I would invite you to add in.
I think
sorry.
I agree with everything that Callum and Mila have said. I think what I would add is just agility and speed. I think for us, it was really important to not strive for perfection, but just get things done because they had to get done. So we had to really lean on just let's do things, not worry about the details, and kind of ship different projects and support the communities in need. I think another thing, and this is something that I think positioned as well to weather, the initial storm of COVID, is just that nonprofits have typically always operated very frugally. I would believe that many nonprofits are frugal innovators. We do more with less. So I think that was kind of ingrained into the culture of the organization. We're always looking at, with X amount of dollars, we want to really drive that home and do the most. So that culture of experimentation and failing fast and innovating with little really helped us weather the initial storm. And on a more philosophical level, I think we've been thinking a lot about, the businesses that have transitioned well, or even I would go as far to say thrived during this pandemic, were either digital or they were essential or they were both. So companies like Ubereats, Instacart, Shopify, they've all come out of this really strongly. And it's made us really reflect on, how can we build something that is in some level essential to people's lives, right? And maybe not in the way that healthcare is essential, but in a more broader kind of context, how can we make Rumie a tool that is you're kind of reliant on it because it's your daily dose of learning. So that's something that we found ourselves coming back to as we transitioned through this period. And I think is worth thinking about for all small business owners, or even if you're an entrepreneur within a large corporation, thinking about that impact, I think can go a really long way.
Just personal thing. Did you say entrepreneur as in like internal entrepreneur?
Yeah. So
I have
larger corporation. Yeah.
I'm going to slip that in my pocket. I hadn't heard that one before. Manoj, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, no, agreed. The people was a big one. But I like thinking about that transition of the business to success during the pandemic. And I think the key one for us, or I saw at Manulife, I'm going to go back to technology, but was the technology at Manulife in the sense of, it was day one or day two during the pandemic, and everyone was able to pick up their laptop, go home, and it was seamless. It was built for the fact that, or transitioning for the fact that everyone could just work remotely. And I know certain companies, it's very standard in the sense you come into the office 5 days a week and that type of thing. And they weren't built for a pandemic in the sense that not everyone can just go home and be able to have a seamless step. So I think for us, that was one of the most important things for the pandemic, or I noticed, is that we were able to go home and not miss a beat. So technology is kind of my answer, along with the people.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, Manoj, and I think that, I think it still ties into what Trishala said about agility and flexibility, and what Callum and Mila talked about regarding, keeping people happy in the sense that they're sort of satisfied and able to really, in spite or despite everything, still be able to bring, their energy to their work. All of those elements I think are very crucial, and I appreciate all of you adding in there. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the ability to do work as well. I think with my sort of kind of technology, in the sense of not having to wait 3 hours for an email to send or that type of thing. So
for sure. Let me then transition into our second open question, sort of like a two-part question that asks, what's the one thing that you can't wait to get back to doing once the pandemic is over? But also, what is the one thing that you really look forward to keeping as part of your business, or you think needs to continue being part of your business or your work life once the pandemic is over? And Manoj, how about we start with you?
Yeah. So definitely, this comes back to the people again, and it's those conversation or hallway conversations that sort of start off as being casual and then ends up being an impromptu brainstorming session, or a conversation that you didn't know was going on had you not been in the office. So those types of interactions I definitely do miss, and I think the company or the business is all miss type thing. And I know I've read some articles about Silicon Valley and how everyone was sort of working from home at a certain point, but then they got rid of that because the actual development and the brainstorming wasn't alive. So I think the collaboration and coming back in the office is one thing I definitely do miss. The thing I think we'll be keeping a little bit from Manulife, or we definitely should, is our working days. When I was in the office, I was in 5 days a week. Now I'm at home 5 days a week. Once this pandemic is, say, over, but I mean, as we sort of move into it, to go back to the old normal, I think coming into the 5 days a week may not be realistic anymore. We might be doing 2 or 3 days or a hybrid approach. There's definitely advantage to that in terms of the work-life balance, but also in terms of attracting more talent. Being able to bring in people into your office that don't need to be physically in the office. So, they can be in BC and work out of an office in Toronto. I think that was already starting to happen, but now after pandemic, that will definitely start to evolve and become more and more. So, a couple of my thoughts.
I'm going to take some liberties as moderator and specifically invite Callum to comment on that because, I wonder if you have any specific feelings, particularly about the working from home element, but also if you have another direction to take that question in, please feel free.
I don't get to work from home. It's a very hands-on job. And for everybody in the service industry, they don't either, which, it's probably one of the most at-risk industries. And I get it. It's hard. It's a hard industry. Other than that, to address the original questions, the one thing I can't wait to get back to doing, the tap room, having that open is probably the biggest thing. I miss having people in there. I miss just the atmosphere of it. And that goes both ways. I miss going to bars and hanging out with friends and drinking beer in bars with friends. But in terms of stuff to keep once this is over, I would say the pandemic it's kind of refined a lot of things. It's made things leaner, and in many ways that's very good. Trishala was talking about Shopify and Ubereats and all these tech companies that have really come out on top afterwards. And we're using those tech companies to great advantage, and we've refined our methods around using that technology. We use it every day. Like our process for getting online store orders out has become very assembly line, very clean, lean, fast. Like things have evolved in a good way internally. And so all of those processes will carry over past the pandemic, and the business is better off for it. In terms of our packaging, having third parties come in to take the work off our shoulders makes sense. And I think we'll keep doing it so that our efforts can be diverted to more meaningful things within the business. And it's also inspired us to try and get a government loan to get our own canning machine and to automate things further and not rely on third parties. So those are points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Callum.
Yeah.
I would just, you talking about, how things have changed and how things have been refined, but also your point about, sales channels that are direct to the consumer. In my head, at least, I'm drawing a parallel between that and providing educational material directly to the consumer, which means I will switch over to Trishala now and invite her to sort of, say her piece. Just take it away.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, one thing that we would go back to, I would definitely say we see ourselves going back to being digital first, but not digital only. Because I think this pandemic, we've had to be primarily online and look at digital ways of engaging and supporting our communities. But a lot of them, are offline, even in countries like Canada that we consider to be relatively developed. There are so many of us, even in the downtown core, frankly, with unreliable connectivity. And so that's very much an issue and we see ourselves really, I think some of the best products and services are ones that have an omni-channel approach, and kind of serve their customers or users on all the channels they're on. And for us, that's kind of on a spectrum of low tech to high tech. So right from text-based delivery through SMS, to offline education, those are all what we would consider channels for us. So I think that's something we would go back to doing and not only being virtual. In terms of what we would keep as part of our business, I would say just kind of designing our professional lives around our personal lives and goals, and bringing our whole selves to work. I think Manoj touched a bit on this, and I think the important thing for us is I feel like through this pandemic, our ability to not just empathize, but be compassionate to our coworkers because we truly relate and understand what they're going through. I think it's really fascinating when you find yourselves in the same situation for a very long amount of time, your human ability to just be there for others and to get what they're going through amplifies tenfold. So I think that's something we would want to keep, just the ability to not just empathize and acknowledge that someone is going through something personally or professionally, but to offer to help. We do that as nonprofits a lot for our communities, and we advocate for them, but sometimes we forget to do it for ourselves and for each other as part of the team. So it's definitely something I think will be really ingrained into our the way we work with each other.
Great. Thanks, Trishala. And in terms of being more compassionate, I'm trying to call back to something Manoj said. People aren't, bumping into each other's in the hallways anymore. At least I hope not, because you're supposed to be socially distanced. But I think the new bumping into the hallway and having a nice chat is someone's pet or child, like a young child, just like coming onto the screen and just totally derailing a meeting. Sorry, that doesn't really have anything to do with me pivoting over to Mila, which I will do now. Please stop me before I rant anymore.
That's fun. I think we all enjoy your rants, Don. It's entertaining. You're a good host. So I think I would definitely echo a lot of what has been said in terms of the need for social gatherings. I miss sharing food. I know that's peculiar, but I like sharing food. And I think that there's some things around work from home that will stay the same for us, but we've had a lot of trouble with creative meetings. So Post-it notes virtually doesn't quite work the same way. It doesn't flow the same way. And so we'll definitely be looking forward to doing those in-person brainstorming sessions. But I think one of the things that we'll keep from that pandemic that maybe hasn't been said so far is this idea of thinking about the future and future change. So I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but we've had so many changes, and it feels like it's speeding up. There's a really excellent speaker. His name is Pascal Finette. He's from Be Radical. If you can ever meet him in person, he's amazing. And what I really liked about some of the things that he talks about is that, it happens slowly and then quickly. So this idea of how technology changes and morphs our environment is going to continue, and our changing environment is going to continue. So just even keeping the mindset of thinking forward, trying to predict the future in small ways can help us be more nimble and keep that lean mentality, keep the idea of being able to be responsive.
Okay. I think the appropriate Waterlooism would be beyond change, but perhaps, that's why I'm not on the marketing team, right? Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think that all of those questions and all those responses, rather, to the questions of what we want to get back to and what we want to keep, all sort of revolve around this idea of what's best for our work situation just as human beings, right? Rather, whether it's us all going back to the office, 5 days a week, or, trying to trying to fuse working from home and working from the office together, whether or not we're able to actually do that. All of them do seem to revolve around people. And I think that's hopefully what our audience is going to take away, at least for that question in particular. Unfortunately, I will have to cut things off there a little bit, unless maybe 2 minutes if someone has something incredibly burning that they want to say.
I thank you, and I think all of us can thrive and survive. There is hope, there's optimism, there's things that we can do. There is hope.
Trishala, I see you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I put everything I wanted to say out there, but to reiterate what Mila was saying, I agree. I think, there are tough times, but these are also, huge opportunities for us, and it all comes down to perspective and mindset. So I think every single person on this call can contribute in some way. Even with Black Friday coming up, consider, shopping responsibly, shopping locally, try to find a business that is supporting a nonprofit or has a partnership in place. I think that's really, really important, so we can kind of revive the small business and nonprofits that contribute a lot to the economy. So that's just my last kind of call to action.
Okay, I appreciate that, Trishala. I guess there then I will say, unfortunately, it is time to wrap things up and wind the night down. So, obviously, first and foremost, Trishala, Callum, Mila, Manoj, thank you so much for sharing your insights with me as well as with all of the people joining us tonight. Hopefully I speak on behalf of everyone when I say that I really appreciate you taking the time to speak and share your insights, and I wish everybody all the best. The audience should know, of course, that all four of you encourage attendees to continue, the conversation or to ask any follow-up questions by connecting with you on LinkedIn following the event. So everybody listening, feel free to do that. And furthermore, calling back to earlier on, Mila Banerjee is going to post a link to Personify AI, and which is her AI wardrobe assistant. And I believe the code there was Waterloo, but she will definitely help me out by putting that in the chat. Please check that out if that interests you. I'd also like to thank Manulife Financial for their support in making this event come to life. Manulife is also the proud sponsor of our prize draw this evening. So first of all, Taylor Roth, if you're out there, you are the lucky recipient of a gift card for submitting a question. And Jennifer Wan, you are our lucky attendee tonight. So you will also be receiving a gift card. The alumni relations team will be reaching out to both of you individually in order for you to claim your prize. So that, unfortunately, is all the time we have tonight for this event. So on behalf of the entire Toronto Alumni Chapter, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I hope that everyone joining in enjoyed hearing what our panelists had to share. If you enjoyed this event, follow us on social media on Facebook and LinkedIn, and stay tuned for more news. We're winding down for 2020 and for the holidays, hopefully to have a very relaxing and just like low-key end to the year. But we are also planning out a bunch of great stuff for 2021, and we would love to see you then. There will be a very, very short survey sent to your email from us following the event. So please, when you see our email, we would love to hear your feedback so we can continue to build great events like this one. Our last and final remark is a quick announcement on behalf of the campus community. So if you are in a position to hire a co-op student or know someone that is, please visit uwaterloo.ca/hire for more information on that. Hiring a Waterloo student is more flexible than ever before, and a great opportunity to tap into an amazing talent pool. And with that said, thank you everybody, and have a good night.